Good evening, everyone. Hi, have waves happening. Great, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. It has been, for a lot of people I was talking to, it's been your first event back with us in a while. So welcome if you haven't been here in a little while. If this is your first time, special welcome. We're so excited to have you all at the Atlanta History Center. My name is Claire Haley. I am the Vice President of Public Relations and Programs here for the History Center. I got to meet so many of you that have been on all of our virtual author talks, so that was really fun to put names to put faces to all the names I've been seeing. But we're so excited to welcome you to tonight's event with Baker Cheryl Day in conversation with Angie Mosier. I see a lot of you are already holding a copy of the book, but if you're like me, tonight is a great opportunity to grab a gift book on your way out. Cheryl will be signing books after the event. If you pre-ordered your book, it is pre-signed, but if you'd like it personalized, she'll take care of that for you after the event. And for tonight only, they're 25% off. So if you haven't yet gotten your copy, or if you want to get one for all of your friends, you can do that out in the atrium after the event. Cheryl and Angie will be taking a few questions tonight, so they will do that towards the end of the program. So as they go through, be thinking about all the questions you have for them, and they will do their best to answer them. We're also live streaming tonight's program, so hello to everyone watching from home. We're excited you could be here with us, even if it's not physically. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers. So Cheryl Day is a New York Times bestselling cookbook author, a James Beard Award semifinalist for Outstanding Pastry Chef, and a self-taught scratch baker and an entrepreneur. So her and her husband own Back in the Day Bakery down in Savannah. If you haven't been there, highly recommend it. She is the co-author of the Back in the Day Bakery cookbook, and she is the co-founder of Southern Restaurants for Racial Justice and a founding member of the Leadership Committee for the James Beard Foundation Investment Fund for Black and Indigenous Americans. She lives with her husband, Griff, her baking soulmate. Story, their beloved dog, and a vast collection of vintage cookbooks down in Savannah, something I think a lot of us can empathize with. She will be in conversation tonight with Angie Mosier. Angie is a familiar face around the Atlanta food scene. She's a writer, photographer, stylist, and cook. She just loves documenting both the food and the folks who make it. She hopes to celebrate it, save it, cook it, serve it, and of course, eat it. So she's a resident of Atlanta. She's a board member here at the Atlanta History Center. We're always just so grateful for her very meaningful support here. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming tonight's author, Cheryl Day, and conversation with Angie Mosier.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out.
I told Cheryl earlier, I was like, I want some intro music, and I was going to get the... So here's our intro music. Back in the day when things were cool, all we needed was ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-da. Right? That's a good way to start. Cheryl Day.
These are swivelly chairs.
They're swivelly. They're fun.
Hey, everybody.
This is so exciting for a million different reasons. Cheryl Day, incredible Southern baker, and also just all-around badass. But also, she lives in Georgia. She decided to come back to Georgia. And here we are at the Atlanta History Center, which is such a cool museum and just a really interesting place to have conversations about things like cake, which absolutely has so much to do with history, right?
True.
Yeah.
Everybody loves cake.
Everybody loves cake, but sometimes cake is complicated, right? So anyway, Cheryl and I are friends, and we're both bakers. I'm not nearly as good of a baker as she is, but...
Not true.
Well, I'm not. But I am a former baker, a professional baker, and books like this were what launched my career. I mean, when I was a receptionist in the Georgia Pacific building downtown while I was going to Georgia State, I pored over books like Rose Levy Birnbaum's Cake Bible and other baking books to try to learn how to get better at what I was doing. And so I feel like this book is for this world. And as a Southern baker, it was really hard to find Southern baking books. So Cheryl, thank you for producing this book. Thank you for being in Atlanta, and thank you for being our friend here at the Atlanta History Center. And for
Oh, I am so excited to be here, and I'm so proud of this book and can't wait to talk more about all of the 400 pages.
I know. So that's a good kickoff because you've already produced a lot of other books. You have 2 major books,
right,
baking books. You have little mini fun books about breakfast and cake and cookies and bars. But tell me how this one came about. Like, how did this encyclopedic volume come about?
Yeah, so my husband Griff decided he did not want to be on the next cover. That was the first thing. And he said that he thought it was my time to tell my story about how I am a girl from Los Angeles and became a Southern baker. And that story goes way back and forgive me if I get emotional, but it goes all the way back to my great-grandmother, who was born enslaved, and she was a pastry cook. And my mom left me a journal of stories and all sorts of information that told me about the history of my family. And it turned out that DNA is in baking is in my DNA, literally. So I just thought with Griffing and my awesome team at Artisan Books, they wanted to make sure that I told the very personal story about how I became to be a Southern baker, and I'm just so excited to share it all with you. I just felt like it was so important because a lot of bakers tend to tell the story of European baking, and there are many origins there, but I just thought it was important to tell the story of the Black women that created Southern baking, to pay homage to them, and to tell the importance of a biscuit is as important as a croissant. And that's kind of how it all started, and it became this book.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look up Southern baking, there's so many books, and there's lots of these, lots of great books with recipes.
Right.
I think that one of the things that intrigues not only Southerners, but also the rest of the United States and parts of the world with Southern baking, it is different than a lot of other kinds of baking. There's twists and turns that ends up in the layers.
Right.
And true history of Southern baking, and it comes from many lands. I mean, it would be interesting to do the DNA of a Southern biscuit, right? Like the 23andMe of a Southern biscuit. What do you?
Right. Well, I say, people always ask, well, how many biscuits? There's 4 biscuit recipes in this book, but, we really think about how many grandmothers there are, and that's probably how many biscuit recipes there are, and they're all great in their own way. Everybody has a favorite style for, because I just thought it's just such a important part of Southern culture, and everybody needs to know how to make a biscuit, and I wanted to make it where you could do a drop biscuit, or you could learn how to make a flaky, buttery biscuit. So
yeah, but also just the pastry. I think baking and pastry feels so daunting to so many people. I mean, just as a former baker myself, I know a lot of people ask me about, why can't I get my pie crust this way? Or why can't I get my whatever?
Practice, lots of practice.
It is a lot of practice. It's like baking is a life's work. When you think?
Yeah, we like to think of ourselves as magicians or mystical figures, right? But the truth of the matter is, baking is science, and it takes a lot of trial and error and practice. And
yeah, but even the science,
changes every day.
It changes every single day. So let's talk about this. We'll get into the heavier stuff maybe in a bit, but like when you moved to Savannah, you went there from LA,
right?
But a couple of stopovers every once in a while,
right? Atlanta,
but basically LA to Savannah. Okay. Were you already a baker when you got to Savannah?
I've always baked. For as long as I can remember, but I'm like you, a self-taught baker, and I decided that I wanted to do something that I loved every day, and crazy person that I am, decided to open up a bakery. And you know about that.
Yeah. So how many of you have been to Back in the Day Bakery in Savannah? Look at all those people. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. It's a magic place. But so with the science in mind, did it change the way you baked when you got to that humid?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's every day it's different. And that's something that I think a lot of people that are just starting out home baking don't realize, that every day, you've got to do little tweaks, and I think the hardest part is not to get frustrated with changes that you have to make. You just have to really, it's very, you have to be in tune to all of your senses when you're baking. And yeah, it's just, it's different every day because of the climate.
Well, and I think a lot of people are worried about seeking this perfection. So what do you think about perfection?
Oh, I think, there's no such thing as I love perfectly. I say imperfection is perfect. I like just the style of baking. That's what drew me to my personal style. I think that's how I honed my personal style. It's very hands-on. I frost cupcakes by hand. I like to see all the hand, movement in a cupcake. Textural, and it stands out. And I think, I'm not about perfection. I'm not seeking perfection at all.
I think when people ask, well, I can't get this way, I'm like, don't worry about it, right?
It tastes good.
It doesn't matter. It really does. And even if it's a total failure, you still just pick yourself up, dust yourself off.
It's edible. And I think most mistakes are edible, and just take notes and learn for the next time. Yeah.
I wish I could eat a lot of my life mistakes. Well, I think it's interesting. So I think a lot of people don't understand that, how you got to this treasury of Southern baking. I think it just kept getting built and built upon. So you started self-taught, cooking simple Southern things, maybe things that were passed down through your flour or a certain kind of flour. So what happened, like when did you start seeing yourself shift into wanting to understand more about more sophisticated technique? Was there a time when you can remember doing that? Or maybe it was Griff, because he loves bread so much. So her husband Griff is a really amazing bread baker. He can do lots of things, but
I don't think I've made the shift. I don't think, I mean,
You have.
I've always wanted things to be to look approachable. And, yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I would describe it as sophisticated.
But I mean, do you remember when you sort of made this jump from just like a layer cake to then something that was a little bit
buttercream roses or
buttercream roses?
I mean, I think
tell us
it
about
was
that.
just a personal evolution of wanting things to look husband, he's a self-taught baker as well, and he taught himself how to make bread and French baguettes and all of this other technique. But I just really every day just kept trying to build and really hone my skills and make it better every day.
Yeah.
I'm a very I don't know, I'm always pretty humble about personal style. I remember someone early on telling me that I thought at one point that maybe I should try to do a different style of cakes that looked a little bit more, professional or perfect, like the perfect icing. But it just wasn't my style, and I had someone say to me that you need to do this style because it's your style, and it's something that folks really resonate to. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've had come in and they'll say something reminds them of their grandmothers or their auntie, and that's really special. I've had people cry because they said this reminds me, like this taste exactly, like something I had, and that's special. I think food really is attached to memories. I like to play with my personal feeling towards nostalgic food and always kind of pushing it forward. I mean, I do love to play with spices. I just think the experimentation of flavor did all of the photographs. She's not really talking about that, but she literally did all of these beautiful photographs, and she photographed my last book too, and we have a couple of other folks that definitely don't want us to call them out in the audience, but Courtney and Haley art directed the book, and Courtney was my ride or die baker that did so many of these beautiful recipes, and they helped tell this story we wanted to tell. And I think this book is just more special than any of my other books to me.
Yeah, this book almost reads like looking through someone's the personal kitchen cookbook.
Yeah.
It really
I had
does.
somebody write me the other day, actually, and he said, I mean, this book, don't get me wrong, like you're way cooler than my grandmother, but he said this book is like, literally looking through my grandmother's recipe cards, and I get to, see these beautiful pictures and make these recipes. And so that let me understand that I feel like, my work was done. I guess I just really wanted to elevate, the bottom line is I wanted to elevate Southern baking and into the world of our culture in American baking, and I just felt that it just didn't have a special place in our history.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that including the important stories, origin stories of these recipes too, because it is hard to trace the DNA of a cake or the
Right.
DNA of a whatever, because certainly people who were brought here against their will from West Africa never made a chocolate layer cake.
Right.
So I think you do a good job by way of recipe, of telling a story that we can up with this being your favorite cake. So what do you call this cake?
So I call that cake chocolate church cake. It's the cake, one of the first cakes I ever learned to bake. It's, to me, a traditional chocolate Southern cake, but it was one of the first recipes that I learned to bake with my grandmother. And it's still, I think we could solve a lot of problems if everybody knew how to make a chocolate cake.
Can we all just commit that we're going to go home and make this chocolate church cake? Because I think that there's so many things about even just the name of this cake and it's describe this cake to us.
So it's a very chocolatey cake. Actually, the batter is liquidy it's literally chocolatey because you melt chocolate. It's not like a cocoa-based cake. It's melted, really good chocolate, unsweetened chocolate, and it's oil, eggs emulsified, and the crumb of the cake is just perfect.
It's incredible. We ate this actual cake. We ate it.
We did.
We shot it and then we ate it.
Some of you know, it starts with a flour roux made with flour and butter, and that's what thickens the frosting. It doesn't have confectioner sugar. It's sugar. I mean, that's a really old-timey recipe. It would have been something that would have been made because of, thrift. So it's butter and sugar beaten, and then you add this roux, and it has a texture of like a really special Swiss or Italian meringue. But it's usually people kind of are taken aback when they see that there's flour.
Yeah,
but it's cooked flour.
Yeah, there's some old-timey frosting recipes. I mean, red velvet cake sometimes has that flour icing on it, and it's really, it has to do with really brilliant interesting is because a lot of this stuff may have already existed in France or Italy or somewhere else, but a lot of Southern bakers came up with some of this stuff independently.
Right.
And then some of it's completely new. And so it feels so strange.
Yeah.
So I'm looking through this recipe and I'm curious, tell us about chocolate milk soak. I think that should just be one of the ingredients is chocolate milk.
So that is something I would say that is fairly new to do, to add moisture or to make sure that your cakes don't dry out, and to add another layer of flavor to do these different soaks. You could do simple syrup with lavender or the chocolate milk. And so basically, you're baking a cake and you're with a pastry brush, you're brushing that on in between the layers. And so it just adds another layer of flavor, and it keeps
everything
moist. Yeah.
And I love that the frosting is a chocolate butter roux frosting.
Yes.
Now that makes it super simple. Called church cake.
Yeah, that's just what I grew up calling it was a chocolate church cake because my grandmother always made it for either Wednesday service or Sunday service, and it just became known as the chocolate church cake.
So it was one of those things that she made it for after church at your home, or to take it to like a church gathering?
Both. Okay. But there's a whole chapter. We could talk about that in the book, and one of them is gathering cakes. And there's been some discussion if I should trademark gathering cakes, because no one's ever heard what gathering cake is, but apparently some think I've invented the word. But I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, my grandmother would either make that to have after service. My mom used to say she was from Alabama, the whole state, because her daddy was a preacher. So there was a lot of times.
Did he travel? Like,
yeah.
Was he a revival preacher?
Traveled. Mm-hmm. And so cakes were always going somewhere. Somebody always needed cake.
Yeah. I know. I mean, and you always need a cake.
You always need cake. There's several recipes that there's like loaf cakes. A lot of these recipes call for 2 loaves because you don't just make one for yourself. You make one for somebody that needs cake.
Yeah, you should always have cake. So I think the chocolate church cake is such a cool jumping off point for discussion. I asked Cheryl, do you have like a signature cake? I love all baked goods, but there's always this thing. Are you a cake or a pie person?
Oh yeah, there's debates.
Yeah, and I love both cake and pie.
Same.
Clearly, I do. But I love cake more than anything. Are you cake or pie?
Oh, I'm what's in front of me.
Yeah, me too. But the chocolate church cake, and to be honest with you, like chocolate cake isn't my go-to layer cake, but this one,
I think of coconut cake for you.
Yeah, coconut cake's my thing. But that just has to do with nostalgia too. Rich's coconut cake is my nostalgic touchstone. So, and that's a very Atlanta thing. Does anybody remember Rich's coconut cake? But it's interesting because it is. I'm intrigued with Cheryl's story for so many reasons. I think it's interesting that anybody would decide to make a business out of baking, because I tried it and it almost killed me. So my hat is off to you for doing it and keeping it going. And so I'm curious, as a woman who grew up in LA, ended up reverse migrating is what I'm going to call it. And other people, I didn't make that up. Other people talk about reverse migration, especially with your story. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious to know what drew you to Savannah.
Well, I hope that everyone that has a book will take the time to read it from the very first page, because one of the most important parts of the book is on the very first page. And it talks about, a lot of things in the introduction, but I would say I talk about this a lot in the book, that the fact that my mother and my family were part of the Great Migration, which was black folks basically leaving the South and migrating to all different parts of the country. My family moved to Los Angeles. And I think the fact that my mom was so involved in civil rights and so many social justice causes gave me the
quest, right?
Yes, yeah. I was, because of history. I'm a big history, and family history and culture is so important to me, and my roots are in the South. So,
well, I applaud you for setting up shop in the Starland area of Savannah, which I think is also really important.
It is. I'm
businesses,
right?
Yeah, and
I chose that neighborhood because so our neighborhood in Savannah was mostly a black community, and when my husband and I chose that neighborhood, we did so because we wanted to create a business that would pride for our neighbors and for people that looked like me. And so I just thought that was really important. So 20 years later, we've become the hub of the neighborhood. It's a lot different now, but it still has this really great sense of pride of community.
Yeah, you got Shadell's right next to you.
Still.
There's a really good convenience store where we get, so every day we would
Cold
shoot,
beer.
we would shoot, and then we would have our cold beers from Shadell's convenience store next door. So, you know, when you first moved there, though, you moved there with your sister, and
Yes.
you had a little boutique.
Correct.
That because she's very she likes more than just baking. Cheryl has this lovely sense of style that people are drawn to, and that's one of the reasons her bakery is so charming. But you also, you know, you and your sister had a boutique there.
Correct.
And then how did it evolve into the bakery?
Well, actually, the bakery was a very small part of the business. So my sister did have a boutique. My sister's since passed away, but we shared a space, and I guess that's my being from Los Angeles. I see one of my oldest and dearest friends here in the audience, and she could tell you. And then we were opening up a very small bakery to kind of, we thought, this would be cool if somebody's shopping. Of course, they would want a cup of coffee or a cupcake or a cookie. It was something that was really a part of my life growing up in Los Angeles. I know we said we were going to talk about the, this would be a good segue, but the Baked Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
Cake that is in the book. I always thought that shopping and lunch were hand in hand.
Yeah, a day of indulgence.
Yeah,
right?
because when my sister and I went shopping, and there was a place that we went to in the Sherman Oaks Fashion Square, where I grew up near, and they served something on the menu that was very much like this Baked Alaska, and we would always get like tuna sandwiches, and we would
Baked
get
Alaska at this place.
We would get. They called it a Mauna Loa. It came out kind
Flambé.
of, it was flambéed. So anyway, so that's a very personal.
Well, it's also this Baked Alaska is so interesting. So it's Treasury of Southern Baking, and you don't think about, you think of Baked Alaska in like, to me, and I think a lot of cookbooks are aspirational.
Yeah.
I'm going to bake a few things out of it every year, but I love to read the head notes. And I mean, if you do any book justice, it's just the head notes, right? The intros and the head notes and the chapter openers are like the thing that grab you. And
Well, I think a lot of books that I love, I do like to read them from the first page, and it's
agree.
almost like reading a novel, hopefully. And then you get to kind of dream about what you might bake.
Well, so you're saying this Baked Alaska is so interesting because it makes sense that it would be something from New Orleans for sure. But you're saying that the most common origin story claims that the pastry chef at Antoine's came up with it, and it makes he created this celebratory dessert in 1867 to honor the Alaska Purchase.
Right.
Like he cared. He didn't know he cared. But
again, there was probably
gave him
booze
this
involved.
awesome reason to make an ice cream filled cake with meringue and flame it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's so cool that you have this in the Southern Baking book, because you take us on these little twists and turns. Like you see something called the Treasure of Southern Baking. You're like, okay, here's another, biscuit, layer cake, blah, blah, whatever. You're going to tell us about cornbread and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But you really take us on this little journey. And I think Another one, and we're jumping around a little bit because I know we want to leave some time for you guys to ask some questions, but
It's like come for the biscuits and stay for the baked Alaska.
you don't always have baked Alaska at the bakery. Though.
No.
But in your home, come for the biscuits, stay for the baked Alaska. So it's interesting because, like in this chapter in particular, to me, and that's super fancy in my opinion.
Yeah, that's my ode to Edna. Is she is one of the premier Southern cook figures, chefs, and
but also like a Harlem Renaissance queen,
right? Exactly,
yeah. and she used to come here on this property and do things.
Yeah,
she's cooked here before.
She wrote her cookbooks are written in menu style. And profiteroles is one of the recipes.
Tell us what a profiterole is.
So it's basically a cream puff with a pat of Alaska. I think most people think that's really difficult to make. I actually did a video recently on Bon Appetit, and I showed
that video is awesome. You should go online and watch it.
It's really not that difficult to make. It's just really like most recipes, planning. But I mean, if you show up like Christmas or New Year's Eve, and you bring that out to the table, I mean,
yeah, it's pretty dramatic, especially if you get your little meringue bowls. And the meringue doesn't have to be perfect.
No, I actually either pipe it on like that. Courtney did a beautiful job doing that. But again, I just frost it on by hand.
Well, and then you can use a blowtorch too.
Right.
Or you can flambe it.
The power is in the blowtorch, really.
I can't lose this personal note you sent me. This is my personal copy, and Cheryl sent me this beautiful. She always sends you're amazing. That's one of the things that I love about Southern baking is it goes from really humble, my family's all from the Mount Hills of Tennessee, and that's a whole different kind of baking. You cover some of that stuff in here.
Yeah.
But then you get to cities like Savannah and Atlanta and New Orleans, and it's very fancy pants.
Yeah, a lot of French influence. And again, I mean, I just think that your average person would not have known about all of the influences of Southern baking that are just, from not just the simple, basic, recipes.
Well, and also, I think that's one of the other interesting things about you as a Southern baker, a Black woman. I think that, for somebody whose family comes from Appalachia, it's different because it's just a different culture, but I think a lot of Black cooks in the South learned these really wanted them to know how to make these things, and some of them did get to go and learn how to make this stuff. But I think it's really interesting, and I love that you've included this because it's a really important part of our history to have this influence of this incredible refined baking in our canon of Southern baking.
Yes. Well, I am happy that, and I feel privileged that I was the person that made the choice to write a book like this.
Well, to be honest, I think that in the South, it probably most likely was African American chefs that were making these things.
Well, I think yes.
Not I think, yes.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it makes sense that it was Black cooks that were in the kitchen, bakers, and they were making these recipes, and a lot of times they were able to learn, own these skills of recipes that came from France. ingredients that slaves brought over in their hair and all over, because that was something
Hems of their clothing.
in the hems of their of the culture and Gullah culture. It's really big, and so I thought it was important to include these mini wafers. A lot of take on them is a little bit different, and yeah, they're delicious.
Sesame seeds that were brought to America were brought
Right.
by enslaved people, and they were grown fairly prolifically in the Low Country, Savannah, Charleston, places where so interesting story. You know, the Benny seeds that were the original seeds that were brought over, you know, have a specific DNA, and they were almost extinct. In fact, they were probably considered extinct.
Yeah.
And then some people were able to find some that were growing, and Glenn Roberts, who has Anson Mills, found he's done this with many, many seeds with the help of other. He would never take just sole credit for
Right.
this, but I'll never forget when he had just a very, very small amount of seeds, and he was finding chefs to be the end user and farmers to grow the seeds. So he would show up at somebody's farm and say, "We have this many seeds. Will you please try to grow these? And then we have a chef, Cheryl Day or Sean Brock or whoever, that will be your end purchaser." And a lot of the farmers just wanted to grow it anyway. They brought this seed back from extinction, and it hasn't even been that long.
No, but seed preserving is so important to keeping these recipes alive, because a lot of the recipes in Southern baking were almost extinct or very close to being erased or forgotten in our culture, because a lot of it is oral history, and a lot of recipes weren't written down. So if you have grandmothers or aunties that bake that are getting older, you know, stand by them and see how they're making how they're baking and what they're doing, because it's really precious.
Yeah. So the seeds you're eating on these cookies tonight
Yes.
are from those.
Right.
And they do have. Now there's lots and lots of them, and it's only been like 15 years maybe since he had literally a tiny amount, and now it's a pretty prolific plant. So I think once they got people to start growing it again, it's back. So do your part and order from Anson Mills, because the flavor of these Benny seeds is so incredible.
That is incredible.
So
As you taste it.
I know. And I think you said it, you know, eat it to save it. So whether it's an ingredient or a recipe, you eat it to save it.
Right.
Yeah. So what was the other cookie? We had the lime.
The brown butter lime
Cookies.
cookies.
Tell us about
was the other
those.
cookie. So that's just a very simple shortbread cookie. The ingredients that you can paired really well together, because it does almost have kind of a nutty undertone. Just another simple.
So fun. And shout out to Little Tart, Sarah O'Brien at Little Tart. Is she here?
Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah.
Yay!
God.
Yeah,
she's-
so Sarah and her team at Little Tart here in Atlanta, right in Grant Park. If you all haven't been there, in my personal opinion, her bake shop is the best in Atlanta, dare I say. I dare say it.
Oh, I just say it. I don't dare say it. I'll take somebody down on that one. I mean, they
The
just care.
croissants, oh my God.
They care so much, and it's
Yeah,
like,
it's all good.
it's one of those things that when you have a bakery and you're a person that goes in and you're like, all of you understand. I think there's a handful of small bake shops and restaurants that are doing that. And so, I mean, I think the encouraging thing is to
Support small bakeries.
Yeah, because, it is an indulgence. It is a treat. And it's something that you shouldn't keep yourself from doing. It's something that makes you happy, but it also saves recipes. It saves people's careers. It saves your neighborhood. I mean, I am lucky enough to live in this.
You are lucky enough.
Live in the same neighborhood as Little Tart, and I mean, she is like personifies, and you do too, like the establishment of a business in a neighborhood. And so, if you're lucky enough to be in a neighborhood that has any of those kinds of things, or just a donut shop or ice cream shop or whatever, or even just whatever, just go to it. A convenience store
Shipping
that's
cookies,
independently
too.
owned. Yeah.
She'll be shipping cookies for the holidays, little cookie boxes. So go buy cookies.
She's probably like, yes. Okay. But you are too.
Maybe.
Yeah. And you're making some like beautiful products now. So tell us about Janie
I am.
Q.
Yeah. So Janie Q. So I come from a long line of queens, meaning that for some reason the name Queen was passed down to several women. There was Hannah Queen Grubbs. There was Janie Queen. I'm still a little salty that I was not named Queen. I'll just be honest. But so my new brand that was my big pivot, as we're saying, project is called Janie Q Provisions, and it's jams and all kinds of, we're doing biscuit mix and some other fun products we're going to be doing as a part of that, some baking classes, and yeah, so Janie Q, part of Back in the Day Bakery.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we'll segue into, and then we can open it up for people to ask us some questions. But, I think this book is really important. It's a stamp. It's a time stamp over many decades and years and people. And so any cookbook you buy, I mean, especially one that's as heartfelt and cared about as this one is, even if you don't bake out of it, just read the stories, because I think it reads like a history novel. It's like we should do like a version of Masterpiece Theater should do something on your baking. It's like a baking version of Downton Abbey or something, but it's all about Black Southern chefs
beautiful,
or something. Yeah.
Thanks to
you
and my awesome team.
Well, I will say this, and then we can talk about that, and then we'll ask some questions. But that was one of the things that when I first started going to Back in the Day Bakery, I noticed was they, always had for breakfast these incredible biscuits and the jam. It wasn't just like biscuits. It was like every single thing you got with it was incredible. The butter was incredible. The jams were incredible. And it's because they have stuff like this they're still making the jam out of this incredible copper pot.
We are.
Yeah. You're still making Janie Q out of that, too.
Yes, we are.
So, I mean, like when you order a jar of Janie Q, you're getting it from this pot. I mean, there might be a couple more, but
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, it's not like it's coming from a factory.
No, it's not.
So that's a good Christmas buy, I think.
Yes,
you can
thank
get it
you.
online, right?
We have an online shop. That's right.
And it's homage to Janie Queen.
Another queen.
Yeah. So when you're doing something like this book, I mean, when did you start thinking about this book? You have an amazing editor at Artisan Books, Judy Prey.
Yes.
And she's been there from the beginning, right?
Yes.
And I think that sometimes people come to these things and you guys are probably interested in how you create a cookbook or how a cookbook
I mean,
gets
there may be
created.
questions, and we'd love to hear those. A lot of usually the first thing people ask is if I had an agent to do this, and I did not. I do not. I was very fortunate that, and I always give credit to my dear friend Grace Bonney, who is the founder of Design Sponge, and she did a book talk here recently. She has beautiful books.
Yeah, yeah.
In the company of women. The latest book is about women who...
Generations of women.
Generation of
influences,
women.
yeah.
But she actually... I was on social media, on Twitter, back when I was on Twitter. I'm more on Instagram now. But I was talking about how I was working on the proposal for my cookbook, and Grace is one of those women who is a great friend, and she is... the great ally and cheerleader, and she said, would you like me to introduce you to my publisher? And she told me that it was Artisan Books, and I looked at I read in my library. I have a very extensive library, and I noticed all of the books that Artisan had done, from Thomas Keller's cookbooks to Sean Brock and all these people, Frank Stitt, all these people that I admired. And it almost made me a little nervous to start at the top where I wanted to be. But she made the introduction, and within a very short time, they offered me my first cookbook deal, and they were very clear to say to me that this absolutely never, ever happens this way. And I just had to thank my angel, my sister that had passed away recently. And I said, well, it happened to me. So that's how I started doing cookbooks. But I really, Judy Prey, my editor, really did. They said that they like to take authors and really grow with them. And that's exactly what they've done with me. And this book, I really had the encouragement to really, I feel this is the first time that I really felt like I was a cookbook author and, not just a baker, but I really felt like this was another part of something that I find to be my calling to do more writing. So.
Well, and I think that once you establish this relationship with Artisan and they see that, you produce a good product, people like you, all that kind of stuff, then you got to really tell your story.
Right.
You, like you said, Cheryl mentioned to me earlier that she felt like she's been seen.
Yes, I do feel that way. I've had a lot of folks say that they feel that this book is very important and a definitive cookbook on Southern baking. And I do feel seen, probably for the first time in a long time, because, this story actually didn't start out that way. This book started out being, and I'm glad that we took this approach. I knew that I wanted it to be, my editor kept saying, we want it to be a wider lens. We want less stories, less personal stories about my grandmother or whatever. And as you see, it kind of flipped. Somehow it did become a very personal story. First page talks about my grandmother, because they did realize that my story was a very important part of this Southern culture and of American baking. And so it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I do feel that it is very definitive, very comprehensive. It tells a lot of folks' stories, but it does come back to my very personal story about.
Yeah, and I think, and we can close with this and then open the floor to some questions. But I do feel like I appreciate that you're able to speak for a lot of people who have, and as a former professional baker, people are always like, oh yeah, my grandmother used to do X, Y, or Z. That's a common thread. My husband plays bluegrass music and everybody's like, my grandfather used to have a fiddle and blah, blah, blah. It's like we have this thing that we got to relate to, and it's part of our fabric. And I think that what we're seeing in this cookbook is that so many women, baking by and large was women's work for many years and still is. There's a lot of really talented men bakers and male pastry chefs or whatever, and all different people are doing it. But the thing that I think a lot of women who want to become bakers do understand is that there's a lot folded into these layers. There's a lot kneaded into the dough, and there's a lot mixed in. And it is not just ingredient and technique. Mm-hmm. It is pain and joy and history and geography and science. And it is brilliant. And so I'm grateful to you for putting this together. It's like a really beautiful, important story. It's not just a cookbook, you guys. Okay, so
thank you.
So just thank you, Cheryl, and thank you to all of you who have this. We all have it in our. I've got one 3x5 index card that is. If a fire breaks out, it's going. I know exactly where it is, and it's going with me because it's so much more than a recipe. I can take a picture of it. It doesn't matter that I have a picture of it on my phone or I have a picture of it. I need that card and I need that taste because you're eating the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for coming to Atlanta, and thank you for involving so many Atlantans and being a part of Georgia. We appreciate that you wanted to come back here and that you deal with a lot of bullshit then and now, as most, people do every day. So thank you very much. So Claire's going to take the mic from me, and we would love to answer a few questions. And then some of you want to have your books signed, personalized. I think all the books are signed, but I think personalized. Then Cheryl's going to be able to hang out for a little bit afterwards.
All right. So if you have a question for Cheryl, just go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll come to you. All right.
Good evening, Cheryl. What a privilege. My question is regards to vanilla. And we have all sourced vanilla probably from different places in the world. And do you have a special vanilla that you use and the importance of it? And can you add too much?
It's difficult. Thank you for your question. And tell me your name. Belinda is sitting next to my oldest friend in the world. We met on the first day of high school. So hey, Karen. But Belinda, so it's difficult to add too much vanilla. My favorite is a dark Mexican vanilla. I think if you're making something that is really simple, like a shortbread or something like that, and it just asks for vanilla, you definitely want to buy the best that you can afford. And I think a Mexican or a Tahitian or a Madagascar, but I love a Mexican style vanilla. It's just got a really great flavor. It's hard to add too much, I think.
Hey, girl.
Hey.
So this book has really been a journey.
Yes.
And
don't make me cry, Karen.
I want to go back to something that you just said, that where it started was, commercial. You know, that was the lingo or the hidden code for broad, and it's commercial.
Right.
And then it came back to what it needed to be. But what I haven't had a chance to ask you, and I would love you to talk about, is what about this journey surprised you most?
That's a good question. You're full of them. So I would say what has surprised me most about this journey is that people are willing to listen to and open themselves up to another culture and to learn. And that's been a nice, pleasant surprise for me, is that people are willing to learn about history. I think one thing that really surprised me the absolute most was that I'm the first person that ever, and again, going to the beginning of the book, I talk about how this book would not have been possible without the millions of enslaved Americans, that we wouldn't have had sugar, we wouldn't have had a lot of things. And I was shocked that no one has ever discussed it. And I just felt that I couldn't write a book about Southern baking and not address the fact of our past and in the South, and very importantly, to show the changes that we're making here in the South to move forward. And so yeah, that's probably the most important part, I think, about this journey. Thank you.
Hello,
Hi, what's your name?
Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Hi. I was curious if you have like one or two recipes that you are super excited about people trying out, or if there was one that you were like, man, they're going to like this one.
Oh, gosh. Well, like I said, with the cake and the pie, really, I love everything that's in front of me. But I would say some of the most important would be something as simple as learning to make a pound cake. I think that's a really simple recipe, but it's something that can easily be messed up if you don't follow the directions and do it properly. There's a great cold oven pound cake. I think that's just culturally, it's something you don't usually see on a menu anywhere. And we have this saying at the bakery, when you know, you know. Like, people, they see the pound cake on the menu and their eyes get big as saucers. And they just get so excited about such a simple recipe. Another one I would say are the tea cakes. We didn't talk about tea cakes, but tea cakes has a really great history. Angie and I were talking about that. It's another one of those things, if you've ever heard, it's a cookie, actually. It's a very simple cookie. But it's very important in Southern culture. Also became very famous in a book about about tea cake. Yeah, named famously tea cake. Pardon? Thank you. Yes. And so, see, you know about tea cakes, but that's a really important one too, and fun. But I don't know, there's like over 200 recipes. I hope that every chapter there'll be something that will, jump out on the page that you'll want to make. One person did ask me recently what I thought was the gateway recipe to the book, and that I would say is a drop biscuit, a cat head biscuit, because it's something you can easily master. Jennifer Garner made them during the pandemic in her pajamas, and they became quite famous. So I would say that's probably the gateway. It's a great recipe because it's a drop biscuit. You don't have to do much to it. You can turn it sweet or savory, and yeah.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Here.
Hello. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So, as an avid cookbook collector myself, and
I know you are.
Yes. So you were mentioning of you looking through your cookbooks. How many cookbooks do you have in your library?
I think we may have talked about this before, but I don't know how many I have. I'm afraid to count, but you've seen them. There's a lot. They have taken over my entire dining room. How many do you have?
7,000.
Well, thank you for buying this one. Wow, that's a lot. So now I'm going to have to count. Hi.
Hi, my name is Gloria Smiley.
Hi.
I know Angie very well, and Johnny too. I am a native Savannian. I was born in Telfair Hospital,
Oh, wow.
and I also had a grandfather who was a baker,
Okay.
and I also had very close ties to Gottlieb's Bakery.
Okay.
So I just wanted,
Right down the street from where back in the day is.
well, Gottlieb's Bakery was at 32nd and Bull Street.
Yeah, we're at 40th.
Okay, yes. Well, I
And
lived
Bull.
on 37th Street most of my life. But no, I've lived here for many years. But I'm glad to see that you are in, Savannah has a very special place in my heart.
It's a special place to be from.
Yes.
Thank you.
Time for one more. Go. Okay.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
I'm Constance.
Hi, Constance.
I have booked a house on Airbnb in Savannah for 2 weeks in May.
Oh.
So I will be stalking you, not
Okay.
illegally, but, appropriately. And
Okay. I hope you'll take one of my baking classes.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. So 3 of my best friends will be there with me. 2 of them like to cook. The other one, we don't know where she came from or why she's our friend. But so I can
But we
find
love her anyway.
we love her anyway. She's a good eater. So you have cooking classes.
We're working on them. When are our cooking classes starting, Haley? 20.
Get her dates.
Yeah.
So we'll be there in May. And
Perfect.
I'll look you up. And if you don't have a class, can I at least hang in your kitchen?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put you to work.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm a pretty enthusiastic amateur chef.
Oh, good.
Thanks so much for this book. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. I don't think I've heard so much just joy and laughter in a talk in a long time. So it's just been so wonderful. As Angie was saying, if you haven't yet purchased your copy of the book, I'm not entirely sure what you're waiting on. It's out in the lobby, 25% off tonight only. If you pre-bought your book, it is pre-signed. But if you didn't, then you can get it signed or personalized by Cheryl after the talk. But just please join me in thanking Cheryl and Angie so much for being.
Thank you all. Thanks for having us.
And we will see all of you out in the lobby. Thank you. I got it. Yeah.
What's that?
It's Pepto-Bismol Chews.
Pepto-Bismol's in a chew?
Yeah, they taste great and provide fast relief. And you can always have Pepto-Bismol handy.
Ooh, let me try it.
Sleigh bells ring, are you listening? In the lane, snow is glistening. A beautiful sight, we're happy tonight. Walking in a winter wonderland. Gone away is the bluebird. Here to stay is a new bird. To sing a love song while we stroll along.